A very good afternoon from wherever that you are watching us. My name is Bongani Mncube, and this is another episode of In Conversation. And today we are continuing with our pursuit to raising awareness about neurodiversity. And joining me today are our two guests from the Center for Neurodiversity. I have Prof. Sefotho and Miss Clayton. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Bongani. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Prof, I'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know your profile is quite big.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I am an associate professor in the Department of Educational Psychology, specifically on the side of inclusive education. My passion is on careers, but specifically careers for people with disabilities. I did work with disability, I think, for quite a long time. Started with visual impairment, but now I'm focusing on neurodiversity as it is, and I've been asked to be at the helm of the Center for Neurodiversity, and we're doing it together with my colleague here and a team of others who are supporting us. I think you have met some of them, such as Dr. Lucia, who was here. This is a new field in which we are all learning, but we hope to grow together. And thank you for allowing us the space to bring awareness in terms of neurodiversity, and this is who we are.
Indeed.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Clayton, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Thank you so much, Bongani. And I just want to echo what Prof. Sefotho said, and thanking you so much for allowing us the space to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing and neurodiversity in general. So my name is Athena, and I've been part of the department now for 2 years. I'm a lecturer and educational psychologist. Before I joined the department, I worked for over 10 years in different school settings as a school-based educational psychologist. And I really loved the work. It's really a very special opportunity to work with children and of all ages, and their parents and the educators, working with them as well. I worked in a high school in Hillbrow for 2 years, and then I worked with the foundation phase children in a private school in Bedford View for just under 10. And I think part of my journey there, I really got a chance to see so many children who had, who did present as neurodiverse. So we had our neurotypical children, as we'll talk about, and our neurodiverse children, and I think it's so important, having worked with them and seeing how little the general public really knows about neurodiversity. It really has made me quite passionate in promoting the awareness of what are these disorders and what do people need to know about them.
Yes.
And I think that's also a particular area of interest for me as well. Another area of interest is psychometrics, so the testing that we do. And a big part of that obviously is also testing for neurodiversity as well.
Oh, and this brings me to this question of, I'm hearing two big words, which is the Department of Educational Psychology and neurodiversity. How do the two meet? How are we having that? I'd like to throw that question to you, Ms. Clayton.
Thank you. So we were very fortunate as a department. There was a vision by Prof. Sefotho and a few of the colleagues before I joined the department to establish a national hub for neurodiversity. And the intention was to firstly promote awareness and screen children, assess children, provide support for children and families and schools and educators and wider community in managing these disorders, offer therapeutic services in addition to the assessment services, and collaborate with other organizations where possible. So being a national hub, we envisage opportunities to collaborate with similar centers all around the country where individuals of all ages can access services that can allow them firstly to name a condition that they may be living with, and secondly develop strategies to help them. I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit later, but a lot of these disorders do present with challenges or barriers to accessing work or social life or occupational life. So to provide strategies to individuals, families, educators, employers sometimes, in helping people who do present as neurodiverse.
Yes, which is where I wanted Prof to pick it up from. Prof, from there, the neurodevelopmental disorders. So can you name a few and how do we see some of them?
Thank you. Maybe if you allow me to add on a little bit of history to what my colleague has added.
Yes.
There are 3 centers of excellence in the country right now, and surprisingly they are all concentrated in Gauteng. I hope they will spread to other provinces also. This was an initiative of the Department of Higher Education and Training, as well as European Union. I think government, in its realization that there have been challenges in terms of implementing inclusion, decided that they should reinforce particular initiatives. In fact, there was a call for universities to come forth to say what areas they could be working in. Yes. So the one center is at the University of Pretoria, which deals specifically with visual impairment. The other one is at VETS, which deals with hearing impairment. And the third one, which we could call the last born among the 3, is our Center for Neurodiversity. The idea was that these special areas should, as you were saying, become national hubs. What does that mean?
Yes.
It means the center really is not a center for itself. It is a center to reach out to communities and as much as possible offer services that people need. So this center deals with what we refer to as neurodiversities. You were saying which ones in particular. Let's pick one that is called dyslexia. Dyslexia is one of those conditions where a person is not able to read words properly as they are. They become inverted, if you like. For example, one would want to see a 9 and it becomes a 6 and something like that. That is what happens. If you look at, again, there's another one that we could call dyscalculia. This is where people are not able to deal with numbers. They cannot, process numbers in a normal way that other people would deal with it. We have your fragile X, and there are many. We have ADHD. There are a couple of them, but this is where now the whole thing becomes so complex that it says it is really a gamut of conditions that people need to understand so that we do not misdiagnose, we do not offer support in a wrong way, but we are addressing something that is important. What we see now becoming very popular has been autism. Yesterday I was at the launch in Sebokeng where the MEC of Education was launching the Autism Month, because April is known as the Autism Month, and the work that people are doing out there. And we are saying, as people who are in the space of higher education, we are there to collaborate with them. We shouldn't be working in this juncture, but we should be seen to be holding hands together to say, yes, we will do research, but we have to infiltrate and go to the communities and find out. We can learn a lot from them. They can also learn a lot from us. It's a question of when do we come together to tackle this mammoth task that is before us, because none of those is simple. Each one of them is very particular and special. And if you allow me to say, one of the spaces that has been created by our Vice Chancellor now is in the space of Down syndrome. And he has actually, with his family, developed a scholarship to say, let's concentrate on this particular one, because even out there, when you look at what is going on, there's less known about Down syndrome. But with the kind of leadership, the kind of spearheading, the kind of support and research that is going to come up from there, we are hopeful that even that aspect of neurodiversity is going to get the attention that it deserves.
Wow.
Bongani, sorry,
Yes,
may
Miss
I add on
Yes,
to
you
that
can.
just a little bit? Thank you.
Yes.
As you can see, we can talk about
Yeah,
our centre for a long
excited.
time.
Love it.
Yes. Thank you for letting me add on.
Yes.
I just want to say, I think this is why we need such a carefully thought out centre and the way that we've designed it, where we offer all of these services. So as my colleague was saying, in terms of the dyslexia, for instance, I think when people hear dyslexia, they do think it's just a difficulty in reading. But this is also where the educational psychology assessment process comes in, because of course, as we know, there are different types of dyslexia, and some are a little bit easier to address and to put in interventions, but some are really tricky. And so part of like reaching a diagnosis is saying to the child, the parents, and their educators, this is a condition, it is dyslexia, this is specifically how your child is affected by it. Sometimes it's sight words, they can't recognize sight words, so it's they can see something, but they cannot identify it. Sometimes they cannot match a sound to the letter, the printed letter. So they know a k sound, but to put it, to match it to the letter C, to start spelling out cat, they really struggle. But once you know the type of struggle that the individual is facing, they're better able to put in the correct interventions. So a child who can't sound out words, if you just give them visual interventions and you just give them more of the sight words, they're never going to, they'll find it harder to learn to map the sound to the letter, if that makes sense.
Yes,
and I think that's why it is so important that there is such a carefully managed process. It's not just for somebody to say, oh, I think this person's got dyslexia. It's quite a careful assessment process. And I do want to echo what Prof was saying about how, so there's a category of neurodevelopmental disorders. And this is something that the American Psychological Association have put a lot of research into, and they've devised this like complete group of disorders, including the specific learning disorders such as dyslexia and dyscalculia and dysgraphia when you struggle with the writing, attention deficit disorder, the autism spectrum disorders. There are others. There's communication disorders, motor disorders, and intellectual developmental disorders. And there are a few things that really do set them apart. So these are things that are present from birth, they're genetic, they're inherited. There's nothing that upbringing did to cause it, so to speak. So, in fact, often the diagnostic criteria look at your background, and they look at things like your language of instruction. So if you can't read in a language that isn't your home language, and you don't know that language, so if you're an isiZulu speaking child and you go to an English school for the very first time and you can't read, we would not be allowed to diagnose dyslexia or any sort of learning disorder, because developmentally you haven't yet had enough exposure to the English language and to English printed language in order to be able to, for us to expect you to be able to read at a specific level. So it's a very carefully thought out group of disorders, but we're not limited to those. As Prof says, we're also doing a lot of work looking at Down syndrome, Fragile X. We want to look at where there are difficulties in learning and development and how we can globally assist individuals with these conditions and their families and schools and communities.
And by the way, even as she says, she referred to the American Association and how it is classified. As the department, we have decided to embrace more than disorders. We want to emphasize the positive side of neurodiversity, to say we're embracing more the needs than the deficits. We want to look at what positive aspects can we glean from each one of these conditions. To say, for example, many people may not know that people with autism have gifts immense and so many varied that we need to learn about and optimize and say, if this person is good at this, for example, they may be highly mathematical, and that is not picked up. But those are the kind of things that we are saying as a center we need to put to the fore, so that with the support of assessments and everything, how do we then hold hands with parents, with teachers, with caregivers, with practitioners out there, so that this individual operates to their optimum.
And it speaks to what Dr. Lucia actually also said, the new term that is this ability, not disability, you know, the ability to do things. And given the case study that we had in our previous episode with her, the neurodivergent child had talent. She was crafting beads and other stuff, which adds to what you are saying, that actually they are smart. And I want us to bring it that, are there enough career opportunities? Are there career opportunities for neurodivergent children?
Okay. If we look at careers from a traditional perspective, we quite limit what I have just said in terms of looking at the strengths, the abilities, the possibilities that they can have. But once as society we begin to change our mindset in terms of welcoming people with neurodiversity, then we will change. Let me use two examples of careers that are known to be out there, but which are less spoken about. We are so used to the ones that are based on their kind of assessment that has been given, the kind of tests that have been given, which usually box people. But there is also there are two types that I think can be so welcoming to them. We call them boundaryless careers. A boundaryless career would be a career that allows a person to work in whatever space without limitations, without boundaries. Who says that a young person with autism cannot be an athlete, cannot be a singer or performer in the film industry? But because we are so looking at it in a very myopic way, then we start limiting them, that they can't do one, they can't do three or four. And yet we have to open the space. The second type of career that they could find spaces in are called protean careers. What are these? We have this flower called a protea in South Africa. Many people don't go in depth to find out what it is.
We just associate it with Protea as well, our cricket team.
The word protea comes from a Greek god named Proteus, who was known to change his form at will. You see, in that kind of a career, you are saying, even if in my industry, this is the type of work that I want done, this person brings this particular gift. How can I allow him or her the space in my industry to operate as the person who they are? Instead of making them fit into my mold, I am saying I'm creating the space for this particular person. Prof. Mary McMahon and the other colleagues are now in the space where they are looking at careers from what they call the qualitative type of approach to where they look at the narratives.
Yes.
When this person grew up, what kind of talents showed themselves? What kind of abilities did the person display?
Yes.
Where we can say, it looks like this person likes doing this. Their inclinations are towards that. And can we allow them the space to be who they are? In 2018, I was in KZN, and we had, research to conduct. And there was this young man who was blind and also had neurodiversity issues. The moment he entered the door, when he touches something, he'd start drumming on it, you know, making a song.
Out of that.
That is an ability that we are saying, in other words, if you promote that, then you are touching, you know, the heartstrings of where this person is, instead of wanting us wanting them to go and you know, do 2 + 2, and then we are saying now they fall into the mold of the career. So in terms of the careers, we want to look at what we refer to as career transitioning of people with disabilities. Not the choices as we traditionally know them, but we are saying from home, what has been the aspects that this person has showed they have strengths in? When we hand them over to the schools, how are they being supported to nurture the gifts that they have, instead of us wanting them to do what we think, you know, curriculum prescribes for them, and throughout the education journey, so that when they get to the world of work, they are people who we can say they are employable. Not necessarily that we want them to fit into our, what you call, but we are saying, can they be able to perform some kind of activities that allows them into the space of the world of work?
Interesting.
Yes, sir.
Interesting. I like that. Ms. Clayton, I just want to bring you in on the aspect of course, us trying to raise awareness, we also need to understand what are the dangers that society, what are the dangers of not knowing more about neurodiversity, like societal, a person who's watching at home, why is it important for them to know? Because I want to understand from the person who's neurodivergent, how does it affect that person in us having a blind eye, turning a blind eye on that person, so that people know how to act and react in certain instances. Of course, it's not everything, but it gives direction as to how to be gentle and kinder.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the question. It's quite a complex one to answer. Yes. I think it goes back to the symptoms of the neurodevelopmental disorders, and they do tend to focus a lot on the delays or gaps that emerge in either specific areas. So if it's a communication disorder, it would obviously be communication and language. If it's a motor disorder, it would be something to do with our motor movements and planning. But it also can be a lot more extensive. It can affect global development. So something like autism spectrum disorder, where they often the language is delayed, social and emotional development. There are very clear gaps. So I think there are, because of these gaps and these that do emerge, I think people do have assumptions about that individual. So if we think about a child with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, these are the children who tend to be, by definition, by the diagnostic criteria, they have to be of at least, like generally, most of the time they're of average intelligence, or if not higher. They tend to be really smart in their own way, but they really struggle with their focus and their attention. They're easily distracted, so a small sound will completely distract them. So, or movements, or just their own thoughts. You know, they can daydream. So a lot of the time, particularly the girls will be the daydreamers, and the teacher will just say, oh, you know, they're daydreaming. They never pay attention, but they don't realize that it's actually very well be a symptom of a disorder. Often with some children, it's a lot more disruptive though. So if there's that hyperactivity, it's not just that they can't focus, they can be they need to move around the class a lot. So these are the children who keep going in and out of their desk. They're moving in and out the classroom. They're often sort of kicking their friend's chair, or standing up and whistling and just doing things impulsively. And it's not that they're being naughty. It's not that they're being rude or disrespectful. And I think as an educator and sometimes as a parent, it's easy to think, I've just told you not to do it. Why are you doing it again? And it really is this like impulsive, there's no thoughts filtering that I shouldn't stand up in the middle of class and start whistling. They just, in that moment, they think, I need to do this, and they do it. And so I think there's a lot of labeling.
Yes.
There are a lot of assumptions about what an adult, a child, adolescent or adult with ADHD, for example, can do or can't do. There's a lot of assumptions with all of these disorders. And I must be honest, before I started studying them, I think I was also guilty of slipping into some of the easy assumptions that we can make about individuals with these disorders. You know, it's easy when you're managing a class and there's a child who isn't progressing, despite the fact that you as an educator are trying so hard, you think, oh, it's easy to think this child is lazy, they're not trying hard enough, they're not practicing enough, they just don't care enough, they're not motivated. So I think it's easy to label, but then when you start to understand the disorder, I think that's where the importance comes in. It allows the child, parent and educator to advocate for the child and help people beyond the individual understand a little bit more about that child's experience and try and put in strategies for the child, family, school, workplace, to try and help that child. So even with some of the disorders, so Prof. Sefotho can tell you about his friend and colleague, Prof. Lauren Lindstrom in UC Davis, and a program that she's got, where adolescents with intellectual developmental disorder, so they do have a slightly lower cognitive ability, they do require a lot more social support and so on, but they're able to attend university. They don't get a full degree, but they are able to live on campus with their neurotypical friends and experience campus life and walk away with a qualification. I don't know if you'd like to elaborate on that a bit more, Prof.
This is one of the dreams that we wish to see happening at UJ. The program does away with the stigma of saying people who are, intellectually, challenged cannot perform in any. So that program, the young people are given an opportunity to experience university life, come and do some course. Of course, it's not going to be your regular certificated course, but they are given some certificate of attendance to say that they have. They go to class regularly like everyone else, but also they are paired with somebody who is staying in the rest, so they stay in the rest. They experience the whole campus life, as it were. And you could see the pride, from them, once they finish that, because who can say no to somebody who says, I have a certificate from UJ? And it's a question of now pairing them with also employers who would understand, who would embrace this type of programs, because the sad part and the sad reality is the following, is a parent who would ask a question that a person asked in Soweto when we were collecting data there, who said, what will happen to my child when I am no more? It means that that parent wants the child to be independent, to be able to eke a living for themselves. But as society, how do we support that desire, that initiative, such that this young person can also be able to function in life? This is where, as society, we are still falling far short. But with the center, we are trying to say with different processes, this is where we want to see things happening, so that a young person can really proudly go out there and say, I also can do this. We use the term differently abled. I'll share with you some of the publications that are out there, where we are saying it's not about being disabled, but being able in a different manner, which society needs to understand, because the deficit is probably not more with the person, but with how we interpret what we see in this person. And that's where, as society, we need to learn a lot.
Yes, indeed. And Prof, while on that, please also take me through the works, the key works of the Center for Neurodiversity. Of course, you all have went into communities in Soweto and have gathered data. I just want us, for people, whoever's watching, to know more about the actual works of the center.
Okay. The first and foremost is the assessments that my colleague was talking about.
Yes.
We want to assess and then support thereafter. And then we will follow up with parental training, where we, together with parents, I think this month we are holding hands with actually the Gauteng Department of Education, where we will be holding a small training for parents.
Yes.
Parents need to know, over and above the condition itself, what are my children's rights when it comes to issues like the SASA, the SARS, you know, everything that has to do with the legal issues, so that the parents are aware and they don't suffer unnecessarily. That's part of the first training that we are going to be looking at. Over and above that, it will be to hold hands and train the trainers in terms of the practitioners. There are so many people out there with centers, with this and that, but which may not necessarily have the requisite training. As well as our own educational psychologists, not many of them would strictly say, I'm really trained in this particular area. So it's an enrichment kind of center, where together we will be saying we are going to train ourselves to better understand and deepen this. Part of what we are doing also, as I alluded to earlier, is to conduct research. Because, you know, sadly, South Africa is so dependent in terms of the psychometric tests that he was talking about earlier and other things. We depend on what has come from elsewhere, other than what grows from the ground. Can you imagine when you get to a village and you say to a parent, there's something called autism? They're going to ask themselves, what is he talking about? Bongani, what are you talking about? But if we are at the level where we can go and be at the level of communities, they might actually have words that we don't know for these conditions. But that is the kind of research that together with communities we need to conduct and find out how best do we deal with these things, even from the cultural perspective. Imagine in our own cultures, especially as the black people, we would tend to say, my child is bewitched, or the family is bewitched. And could that be the fact? How do we turn around people to realize that these are the realities of nature that we have to deal with, without pointing fingers at one another to say it is so-and-so's family which is bewitching mine, but live harmoniously to say these are the conditions that we have, you know, as part of humanity. But what are the best ways that we can embrace them, deal with them, and be supportive of one another? And then one of the most important aspects, I think, of the center again, is to network with like-minded people. We are hoping that we can network with our colleagues at the Baragwanath Hospital. I alluded to the issues of, intake interviews and all that. We know there are backlogs all over the place, and we are attempting to set systems in place where we can help release whatever backlogs there are there, so that the doctors at Baragwanath are not inundated with the intake interviews. And this is part of what we are doing. But basically we are saying that center is for the community. It is in the community. It is a national hub. Anyone can get to us and ask information. As and when we are able to support at that particular time, we will. But where we need to refer, we will also do so that people get the right assistance that they require.
Yes. And Ms. Clayton, I want to pick it up from networking, the collaborations. As the center, internally and externally, what are some of the notable collaborations that you guys have currently?
I think the one that we have established the most direct contact with at this stage is Baragwanath Hospital, as Prof. Sefotho stated. So we are working with the Department of Pediatrics there, the children's ward, to see how we can assist if there are any assessments, and we have had a few referrals already, and that's a really wonderful collaborative space. We are also in the process of establishing a more collaborative space with our own PsyCAD, our student services. So PsyCAD is based on all 4 campuses. It's staffed by psychologists who offer a wide array of services, psychological services, therapies, assessments, and support groups. They run so many support groups on a daily basis, which is really lovely for students, ranging from everything from exam stress to anxiety to relationship issues, whatever it may be. So they really do provide a great space. I just want to say one more thing about PsyCAD specifically, which is also that within PsyCAD they have the disability units. And there, I think that's where the richest space is for potential collaboration, because the neurodevelopmental disorders sometimes do present as perhaps not disabled, as we don't like to use that word, but that difference of ability does mean that there are difficulties in accessing things like tests and examinations. So part of what the disability unit does is it processes assessment accommodations for students who, for instance, can't read yet at the appropriate level for first year university or beyond, and so they may arrange a reader. For example, they'll need a lot of paperwork, but this is something that is available to students. If they are presenting with any of the neurodevelopmental disorders, they could go to PsyCAD, specifically to the disability unit, or the DU as it's called there, and start a process where perhaps they can get support. They can be referred to us as part of that support, perhaps even for some of the assessments. And I think that's one of the spaces where there is a great possibility of work. Yes. And I think as we continue to move, we'll be establishing more collaborations. I think Prof mentioned, for example, High Hopes at Wits University, which works with the families of children who are deaf or hard of hearing, up until the age of 3 ideally. But I think if we just look at a place like High Hopes, which has been around for ages, it also shows us how deeply ingrained some of these systemic difficulties are. So High Hopes is actually based on an international program. As Prof said, the challenge is a lot of our work starts with international programs, and there they have a newborn universal screening. Every newborn in the US has to be screened. So from the day the child is born, parents know that the child has a hearing loss. While here, it often only is identified when the child is much older. And so we've obviously High Hopes that they try as much as possible to promote awareness and say, get your child's hearing tested and screened with the clinics and so on. But sometimes children do fall through the cracks. And communities, I don't think, are empowered enough to know that they can go for screenings and so on, and where to go for such screenings. And so I think part of what High Hopes is doing is trying to advocate for that very basic right, for that kind of health screening is a right. And it does have huge impact on a child's language ability and so on. And I think collaborating more with centres like that, figuring out how they've learned to collaborate, being able to refer to one another, I think that's also one of the areas where there's great opportunity. And I think even just community centres, schools, I think that's one of the places where we can reach just the common person, like the everyday person who maybe goes to school with somebody who has a neurodevelopmental disorder, somebody whose friend has a child who seems to present with some of these symptoms, and they don't know what to do when that child does start being disruptive, for example, at a tea party. Just having that understanding is so key. Prof. Sefotho was talking a little bit earlier about how employment is and career opportunities are certainly possible, but we need the employers, we need organizations to be on board. We need to educate them. But I think it's even beyond that. We need to educate the community in general.
Yes.
So I follow these families on Instagram, and 3 different families, and their children have all been diagnosed with Down syndrome. And what's so interesting about them, they all live in America and in states where there's amazing resources to those families when there is a diagnosis. But it goes beyond just the resources. So it's not just that they have health care, but these children are entitled to education in mainstream schools. And they have classrooms and programs in place to help those children. Those children finish school and they're able to go and find a job. And the workplaces know how to accommodate them. And it's really done through a community effort to almost support one another, not just neurodiverse children, but even neurotypical children. There is very much within those communities that understanding. It's almost as though kindness, a real sense of kindness filters through, and a willingness to want to know the other person's struggles and to put some sort of support in place.
Yes.
And it's really amazing to see how these children are flourishing in this space. Children, the one family has got 2 children, 2 girls with Down syndrome in high school, and they take part in athletics and this like cheerleading type dance thing, and they're learning with their same aged peers. They go to proms. They get asked by children to go to prom. They ask other children. They get included in these things. They have a full, rich life through being accepted. And I think that's one of the things that we really wish to work not only with organizations such as High Hopes or Baragwanath Hospital or any of the other centers around the country, but also with community centers, community people, just to help raise that awareness. So that's, I think, my big dream.
Yes. It
Yes.
really does. It takes a community to raise a child.
Yes, if I can add also at the international arena, the University of Johannesburg belongs to what is called the U21. This stands for Universitas 21 network, and as well as the University of California, Davis, which is where our colleague she referred to earlier, Prof. Lauren Lindstrom, is based. She has been appointed as a distinguished visiting professor in our department. So that collaboration is strengthening.
Yes.
She visited us last August, and this year again she's going to come again and visit. We are trying to consolidate so that we are not alone in the space.
Yes.
But apart from that, we have the University of John Moores, Liverpool, in the UK, and they have also networks of neurodiversity, and these are the people that would like to, strengthen that collaboration with. Apart from that, there are others, but it's a space where you need to choose with caution, because you need to bring on board people who would actually contribute to the young baby that we are trying to nurture as the center, so that it finds its feet, properly, and grow into an adult that we want to see at the end of the day, because these are people's lives at stake.
Yes.
And we need to do things properly without too much hurry, but with focus, with clear focus in terms of who can contribute to what, because as I said, our center is the only one in the country, but possibly one could want to think that even in Africa you don't have a center like this. There may be pockets here and there which deal with, ADHD, autism, and all that. But as a center that says we are dealing with the whole, area of neurodiversity, it would seem like we are actually the only ones in the continent. But that would then open opportunities to be able to link with professionals out there who would, form part of our cohort, our support system on the ground, so that we represent not only South Africa but also the continent, as it were.
And indeed, Prof. Well, closing remarks, Prof. We're at the end of our show, sadly. I'd like to closing remarks to any person watching us right now, to a parent, to the community. What message would you like to leave with them?
Okay. I would say to the community out there, the center is there at the Soweto campus. It is your center. It doesn't belong to the university. Yes, it is housed in the university, but it is a center where you should go and knock and find answers. We know that there are many of you who might be thinking, how do I pay for my child? How do I do this? We are a center that is welcoming. Come talk to us and we'll find ways of supporting you and your child. Sometimes many parents' lives are locked in the lives of their children because they want what is good, what is best for their children. But we wouldn't like to see that happen. We would like to see parents also unlocking their potential while supporting their children, and we are there to support the society as it is. Thank you so much, Bongani.
Thank you, Prof. Well, Ms. Clayton?
Thank you. I think I'd like to say that one of the things that I've come to realize about neurodiversity is that sometimes the very things that do make you different are some of the things that make you very special and unique, and give you strengths. Sometimes thinking differently is the space that allows you to have the creative ideas and thought process that we desperately need. Sometimes having that fixated interest in a particular topic makes you the expert in the topic. So whatever the difficulties may be in terms of the differences of thought, know that there are also a lot of strengths that come with those differences. And I do want to echo, please do come through to the centre. Even if you feel as though you don't have any neurotypical behaviours, we would love to meet you. We would love to connect with all of our student body and to see how we can work together as a community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, for
Thank
coming
you so much.
through.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Well, there you have it, dear viewer. This has been our episode. My take is that let's embrace difference so that we can all be inclusive and build a better society. My name is Bongani. Thank you for joining me in this episode. See you on the next one.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.